are these people?
This segment is brought to you by MintPress.
Mm.
Yeah, the ones that snagged us for
Yeah,
not
all right. I forgive them.
our work, but
You played our
they
stuff. You
at
could have
least
been better, but
right.
next time ask.
We also have Miko Palad have a stream on him, by the way.
Yeah, I'm
the
gonna
interview that we did with
put a link to that in chat, so people can go watch that. After this,
right.
if you missed it.
That being said, this article was too good not to use, and this is written by Alan Macleod. Come on, move. There we go. So he typically writes long, but very concise and very So there's not a lot I'm gonna cut from this, and I did do some cutting. But
I wish you could put less in, Alan, but I feel you sometimes.
Right, but I think in this case he's very thorough, so I think it's worth going through most of it. And then I added
shorter stuff, so we're good.
So yeah, that's why I was a little conscious of making sure at least the ranked choice voting story will be somewhat shorter. But since this one will probably be will be long. But Alan writes, beyond Niger, how ECOWAS became a tool for Western imperialism in Africa. So as I said, he does a very thorough job talking about ECOWAS and its implications in West Africa. So just kind of giving you guys a little more of a deep dive on ECOWAS and why they're problematic in the region. So he writes, there we go.
Yep.
Niger is shaping up to be the surprising front line of the new Cold War. Yesterday, the 15-member Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, ordered the activation and deployment of standby military forces to the country, an action that threatens to spark a major international war that could make Syria look minor by comparison. In this venture, ECOWAS has been fully supported by the United States and Europe, leading many to suspect it is being used as an imperial vehicle to stamp out anti-colonial projects in West Africa. On July 26, a group of Nigerian officers overthrew the corrupt government of Mohamed Bazoum. The move, which the junta presents as a patriotic uprising against a Western puppet, is widely popular in the country, and many of Niger's neighbors have declared that any attack on it will be considered an attack on all their sovereignty. The United States and France are also considering military action, while many in Niger are calling for Russian aid. Consequently, the world waits to see if the region will be engulfed in a war that promises to pull in many of the major global powers. But what is ECOWAS? And why do so many in Africa consider the organization a tool of Western colonialism? Even before the dust settled in Niger, ECOWAS sprung into action, imposing a no-fly zone and tough economic sanctions, including freezing Nigerian national assets and halting all financial sanctions. Nigeria suspended electricity to its northern neighbor. The region bloc also immediately came to the defense of Bazoum, releasing an ominous statement declaring that it would take all necessary measures, including the use of force, to restore the constitutional order. ECOWAS also gave the new military government a deadline to stand down or face the consequences. That deadline has already passed, and ECOWAS troops are preparing for action. Member states of ECOWAS may therefore be obliged to send their troops into Niger, yet many nations are balking at the prospect. Nevertheless, the bloc still seems adamant that military action can come at any time. We are determined to stop it, but ECOWAS is not going to tell the coup plotters when and where we are going to strike. That is an operational decision that will be taken by the heads of the state, explained Fatou Musa, the group's commissioner for political affairs, peace, and security. Despite not yet acting, the threat of the invasion is far from an idle one. Since 1990, ECOWAS has launched military interventions in 7 West African countries, the most being in the Gambia in 2017.
Yeah.
This response has disappointed many onlookers. Journalist Eugene Puryear, for example, described the bloc as part of a corrupt cabal that is directly linked to Western imperial powers to keep Africans poor. Those Western powers immediately lined up behind ECOWAS's position. The United States welcomes and commends the strong leadership of ECOWAS heads of state and government to defend constitutional order in Niger, actions that respect the will of the Nigerian people and align with enshrined ECOWAS and African Union principles of zero tolerance for unconstitutional change, read a State Department press release. Deeming the coup completely illegitimate, the French government also says that it supports with firmness and determination the efforts of ECOWAS to defeat this push attempt. The EU also associated itself with ECOWAS's first response to the matter, said Joseph Borrell, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, thereby greenlighting an intervention. U.S. Acting Deputy Secretary Victoria Nuland also strongly hinted that the United States is considering invading Niger itself.
Which is
it's not
on
our
what
desire.
Right do we have in any capacity? Like,
because France wants them to, basically.
I guess. Sure.
It is not our desire to go there, but they, the new military junta, may push us to that point. Nuland said about her recent... because...
Like, what would push them? Like, what would push them over the edge? Like, that's what she also isn't mentioning. You know?
Well, let me finish this first.
Yeah.
It is not our desire to go there, but they, the new military junta, may push us to that point, Nuland said about her recent trip to Niger, where she said she had an extremely frank and at times quite difficult meeting with the new leadership.
Yeah.
So, as we read last week, Niger has uranium that the French want in order to keep their energy flows going.
Yeah.
Because right now, because NATO has put sanctions on Russia, which supported a lot of the energy in Europe, they now need another source. That would be in Niger. So now basically the locals are basically saying, fuck that shit.
Fuck that
we're
shit.
Like, okay, well, we're gonna... Basically now we're like, okay, we're going to bomb your asses. And we're going to call you illegitimate. No, it's good. And we're going to go to war with you to ensure that we're able to steal your shit.
Yeah.
So that's why I said last week, the implications of this are huge. And as Alan said, this is potentially a new Cold War with Africa that we're going to get ourselves into. Obviously with Russia, in the ether in this. But this is essentially a fight for resources. Because right now the people in Niger have had enough. And rightly so. Because they're not benefiting from the exploitation of the resources that France has been taking from them for God knows how long. And we're going to get more into that. Because there's actually more stuff that I pulled that kind of shows that. So anyway, if we can go back to that screen. I read that. Okay. A measure of how close ECOWAS is to the United States is the constant support Washington gives to the organization. Throughout 2022, the State Department issued statements backing ECOWAS's position on Mali, another country where the military disposed an unpopular Western-backed government. The United States commends the strong actions taken by ECOWAS in defense of democracy and stability in Mali, the State Department wrote. It has also issued similar memos reaffirming its unwavering support for ECOWAS's actions against military coups in Guinea and Burkina Faso. This has meant to many critics seeing ECOWAS as little more than a pawn of the United States. While Washington has presented the situation as ECOWAS defending democracy against authoritarianism, the reality is more complex. Firstly, many of its member states' governments have decidedly shaky democratic credentials. President Aslan Ouattara of Côte d'Ivoire, sorry for the names,
Yep.
For example, violated the country's term limit law and was controversially sworn in for a third term last year. Protests against this power grab were suppressed, leaving dozens dead. Meanwhile, Senegalese President Macky Sall's government has banned the main opposition party and imprisoned its leader. Furthermore, ECOWAS's response to its coups is far from uniform. After Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba seized power in Burkina Faso in 2022, ECOWAS refused to even impose sanctions, let alone consider an invasion. Instead, they merely asked Damiba to present a timetable for the reasonable return to constitutional order. Their indifference to the events may have been due to his staunchy pro-Western outlook and the fact that he had been trained by the U.S. military and the State Department.
Yep.
ECOWAS's top leadership is also intertwined with U.S. power. As journalists Alex Rubinstein and Clint Karenberg noted, the bloc's chairman, Bola Tinubu, spent years laundering millions of heroin dealers in Chicago and later became a key State Department source for analyzing West Africa. Previous ECOWAS's chairman, Matadou Issoufou, was also a staunch ally of the West, in the words of The Economist magazine, though many in Africa might use less neutral language to describe him. So, Tinubu is a character. And like I said, we'll talk about him next week. Yeah. Like I said, we're trying to get a hold of Alex and Kit to see if they're able to kind of share. If not, but DM them and tag them to let us know we're trying to get a hold of them. I did try to get a hold with them this week, and so far, nothing. But
nothing yet.
But yeah,
we'll work on it.
Yeah, but he is. Yeah, but he is a piece of work.
Yeah.
ECOWAS traces its own project of Africa integration back to 1945 and the creation of the CFA franc, a move that brought France's African colonies into a single currency union. The currency, still in use by 14 African countries today, was artificially pegged to the French franc and later the euro, meaning that importing from and exporting to France and later the Eurozone was very cheap. But importing from and exporting to the rest of the world was prohibitively expensive. Sound familiar?
Yep.
Therefore, even after formal independence, the CFA franc trapped African countries into economic submission to Paris. As a consequence, many African governments are still powerless to enact serious political and economic changes, seeing as they lack control over their own monetary policy. This has been a massive boon to France economically, which enjoys a huge resource base from which to extract raw materials at artificially cheap prices, and also a captive export market.
Which we talked about with, forgive me for not remembering her name, Dr. We talked about her before, where she talked about, like the roads in Africa and stuff like that.
Dr. Africana, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, the Berlin Conference.
Yep. In practice.
At work here.
Yep.
In practice. It has also meant that France has maintained a good degree of control over its former colonies. Without Africa, former French President François Mitterrand famously said, France will have no history in the 21st century. But this unjust economic system has also benefited African elites who can import French and European luxuries at the normal exchange rate. And it has also allowed them to siphon off African money into European banks, with French authorities happy to turn a blind eye to the practice. France still holds half of the CFA franc country's gold reserves.
Yeah. Sounds very similar to Vietnam, Plaza said in the chat, by the way.
Yep. Yep. So Apollo, most of you might know Apollo from his work at RBN. He actually has a great thread on this comparable to this article. Do recommend you guys check out this thread. I'm not going to read all the thread as mentions most of the stuff that we've mentioned over the last week and today. But this is what Apollo said. One of the tweets from him that I pulled. France is currently the 7th largest economy with a GDP of around $2.9 trillion. It is estimated that if you strip African wealth away from France, the country would plunge to the 15th place at a GDP of 1.3 trillion. However, France is not the only remnant of franchise colonism. If you strip away all overseas colonial territories from France, their GDP will plummet to 1 trillion, almost a third of what it is today. In per capita terms, France would plummet to a GDP per capita of $12K, which is on par with Mexico. France, without its colonial possessions, would truly be an impoverished country without Africa and its overseas territories. So, so if you zoom out, this is what he also put. So former President Jacques Chirac said, without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power. So this is why ECOWAS is so important, as you can see in this cartoon. So thanks, Apollo, for
summing that up. Appreciate you.
The result has been stagnation and underdevelopment across Francophone Africa. Niger's real GDP per capita today is significantly lower than what it was at the time of its formal independence from France in 1960. France continues to be by far and away its largest trading partner, with the Nigerian economy revolving around the export of uranium to Paris, what is used to supply the country with cheap nuclear power. Talked about this last week. Yet ordinary Nigerians see little to no benefit from this arrangement. As Oxfam stated in 2013, in France, 1 out of every 3 light bulbs is lit thanks to Nigerian uranium. In Niger, nearly 90% of the population has no access to electricity. This situation cannot continue. Thus, to a great extent, France's prosperity is built upon African suffering and vice versa. So Chirac also says, well, we read that part, but he says at the top, go back up. We have to be honest and acknowledge that a big part of the money in our banks comes precisely from the exploitation of the African continent.
So just saying it out loud, pretty much?
Just saying the part out loud, yeah.
Okay.
This explains the widespread anti-colonial sentiment across West Africa. The military coup in July was sparked by public demonstrations against the Bazoum government's decision to welcome French troops into the country, even after their presence in Mali precipitated a coup last year. The new Nigerian junta had suspended gold and uranium exports to France. Down with France, farm bases out, was the rally cry of the protesters who took to the streets in the capital, Niamey, and other cities across the country. So shout out to Nico. And I actually made this comment to him on Twitter. He actually interviewed David. I'm going to butcher your last name, sorry, but David Huening, who is a West African journalist. So actually go support Nico. I think he has it on
Hotspot. On his Twitter.
Not Hotspot. I believe he has it on his actual channel. This interview, but he clipped this for Hotspot. So David basically gives a rundown of what's happening from his perspective as a journalist in the region. So let's listen to what David says to Nico.
It's important to also point out that even the supposed election that brought Bazoum into power was not exactly the free and fair electoral affair. So for one thing, the main opposition candidate, who was expected to be the main challenger, was forbidden from taking part in the election, right? Using the excuse of some criminal conviction this person was actually barred from taking part in the election. So in the first place, could that be considered to be a free and fair election? So these are the issues which, for whatever reason, are not getting any airplay. All people are hearing is that there was a democratically elected president in office, and then the military came in and deposed him, and now they have to leave and put him back into power because that's the will of the people. But the real situation on the ground is a lot more complicated than that. There are a lot of moving parts of the story which don't play well, I guess, in international media.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of what you're hearing in mainstream media is not necessarily like, and again, with ECOWAS, at the helm of all of this, it's just more or less these people who are in are essentially just the puppets for the West.
It's important.
Doing and further exploitation of the country. So, so obviously, as David said, what we're reporting on, it's not going to be reported widely. So this is why I felt it was important to share this story. So, because I'm seeing some shit already about people saying about Niger, you can actually refer them to this segment and be like, nah, this is why people in Niger are. So it's really not a coup. It's a matter of taking back what is rightly theirs in this case. So this is not like a January 6th situation. So but anyway, let's continue. Bazoum, however, has remained steadfastly loyal to France. In an interview with the Financial Times in May, he defended Paris, claiming that France is an easy target for the populist discourse of certain opinions, especially on social media among African youth.
Bruh.
Nope.
Right. Thus, with Bazoum gone, Niger could go from the West's #1 ally in the region to an adversary. I would argue that's been in the works already, and now to fruition right now. ECOWAS imposes strict Western-approved economic measures on its member states, forcing them to obey neoliberal economic laws that make escaping the circle of debt and underdevelopment harder and help make peaceful democratic change harder to achieve, and, ironically, spurred a flurry of military insurrections across the region. The coup in Niger follows similar actions to Mali in 2020 and 2021, Burkina Faso 2 last year, and Guinea 2021. All have positioned themselves as progressive, patriotic, anti-imperialist uprisings against a Western-created economic order. All 4 nations are currently suspended from ECOWAS. A host of states have pushed back against the West ECOWAS's position. The authorities of the Republic of Guinea disassociate themselves from the sanctions imposed by ECOWAS, wrote the Guinean government, describing them as illegitimate and inhumane, and urged ECOWAS to return to better thinking. The governments of Mali and Burkina Faso went much further. In a joint communique, those nations welcomed Bazoum's ouster, describing the event as Niger taking its destiny into its own hand and to be accountable in the face of history for complete sovereignty. Together, they denounced regional organizations, in other words, ECOWAS, for imposing sanctions that increase the population's suffering and imperil the spirit of Pan-Africanism. Perhaps most importantly, however, they bluntly stated that they would come to Niger's aid militarily if ECOWAS invaded. Any military intervention against Niger would mean a declaration of war against Burkina Faso and Mali, they wrote. Algeria, which shares a long border with Niger, has also warned that it will not stand idle if the West or its puppets attack Niger. Solidarity, y'all! We love it here. And to further that sentiment, pulled a clip from Twitter. This is Colonel, again, names, Aduole Maja. He's the spokesperson of the Mali government. Basically spoke in terms of his solidarity with Niger. So, if you want to play that.
Rolling the bean footage.
A rappelé que ça fait plus de 10 ans que le Burkina Faso, le Mali et le Niger gérons les conséquences négatives, conséquences socio-économiques, conséquences sécuritaires,
security consequences, political consequences, humanitarian consequences of the risky NATO adventure in Libya. Of course, the question arises, if it took us 10 years accepting another adventure of the same nation in Niger would take us how many years? We don't know. 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50? One thing is certain. President Goïta and President Traoré have clearly said no, no, and no. We will not accept military adventure in Niger. Our survival depends on it. And of course, the heads of state of Mali and Burkina Faso have taken firm decisions to leave assets, not liabilities, for the future generations. To ECOWAS, we have two messages. The first message is that we clearly demand the end of the starvation of our people. We do not need sanctions. I think our people are going through an enormous amount of suffering. The second message is also an important one. We appreciate ultimatums, but I think ECOWAS is badly mistaken of the recipient. These ultimatums must be addressed to the terrorist groups. We have been waiting 10 years for that. I think we will be very happy for once these ultimatums are addressed to the terrorist groups. Next, to the fraternal people of Niger. These are difficult times. Mali and Burkina Faso have gone through similar ordeals. We would like to reassure them very firmly of our support, solidarity, and we remain resilient and stoic. In the words of His Excellency Colonel Assimi Goïta, not all that is substantial and positive can be accomplished easily. God willing, we will win. It's all about the Benjamins, baby.
No, he's got a point.
I mean,
So,
can we have why don't we have that solidarity here for pretty much anything?
I don't know. Who knows?
See, this is why we should be looking to the global South, folks, because they have their solidarity down, I would say, overall.
A lot better in some respects, right?
Right. And it's beautiful to see, like, these neighboring countries of West Africa, even though they're under the same shit, are recognizing that their success and their survival is tied to Niger's right now. So they're basically like, even though they're part of that same exploitation too, they're like, nah, like, we may belong to you, but at the same time, our people come first. And we stand in solidarity with Niger right now, in terms of what you do to them also happens to us, and we will declare war on you as well. So that's why it's important. Know this, folks. Because as I said, the implications, if we go to war with Africa, and again, this would be like the unheard war that people are not talking about, that's going to affect us here in turn. It already is starting to. But anyway, Pan-Africanism, the anti-imperialist project attempting to create a brotherhood of nations across Africa, I would argue throughout the diaspora, not just Africa.
Sure.
In order to develop independently, has of late experienced a renaissance in Western Africa. Burkina Faso and Mali, Niger's neighbors to the west, are in advanced stages of merging into a federation. This is also probably why this is problematic for the West, because similar.
Someone might be able to tell me in the chat: is it the anti-imperialist project, or is it Pan-Africanism? If anyone from that organization wants to reach out to us, and we'll talk to you. So
right, but the idea of the Poors forming a federation, this alludes to Gaddafi, what he was trying to do. So, and you know what happened to him under the hand of Hillary, basically, right?
Yeah.
So, well, within that democratic at that time. So, the idea of African nations getting together it's not good for the West. So this is another reason why, besides the resources, solidarity, and forming a union a la BRICS, it's not going to pose well for the West. So
nope.
The process is underway, said Ibrahim Traoré, the charismatic military leader of Burkina Faso, revealing that their militaries are now so integrated that it's really the same army. He has also strongly hinted that he wanted Niger to join the federation.
Yep. Cool.
No.
There you go.
There we go. We cannot exclude the idea that another state will join us. If there are other states that are interested, it's certain that we will move closer to Guinea, and if others are interested, we need to unite. It's what the young people are demanding. ECOWAS has come out strongly against the idea, but Traoré remained defiant. We are going to fight, but Africa must unite. The more we are united, the more effective we are, he said. Ooh, who does that sound like, sir?
Unity. This one?
Also.
What? This
Unity
one?
doesn't represent what you're against. It represents what you are for.
Beautiful.
Cool.
God, this is like...
What?
Traoré had styled himself as the radical leader in the mold of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's Marxist revolutionary leader between 1983 and 1987, sporting a red beret as Sankara did.
Which,
Traoré
by the way,
asked questions.
If you're gonna go berets, you should go with a little red beret. I'm just saying.
Right.
You know, like Prince must be paid homage to.
Right. But let me finish this and I'll get to my point.
Yeah.
Sporting a red beret as Sankara did, Traoré asked questions such as, why does resource-rich Africa remain the poorest region of the world? And describes many of his African leaders as puppets in the hands of the imperialists. He is fond of quoting Cuban leader Che Guevara and has allied his nation with Nicaragua and Venezuela. See?
Which, more smart solidarity, like the people that we want to sanction. Hey, let's talk to them.
Right.
See if they'll help.
But notice what he's doing. And I notice this even especially like currently. We try to invent new shit and I've said this, when we don't have to. Like, there have been people in our past that we can use. Obviously, in this day and age, we'll have to remix a lot of what they did, but it's like we spend so much time reinventing the wheel when all we have to really do is just learn the history and apply it appropriately in this circumstance. And this is what Traoré is doing, you know. And I'm sure he's utilizing a lot of Gaddafi in this as well, in addition to maybe Marcus Garvey as well, in terms of like the liberation that he's seeking, you know, for Niger. So he's very and he's young. I think he's what, 28, I believe. So he's young.
Yeah.
So
ready.
Watch out,
prepared,
and ready and prepared and educated.
I'm down.
So you know,
well dressed.
If Smalls was doing this shit, we would speak a lot better. You know.
I mean, can you consider that a raspberry beret? I feel like it's real close. You know, I was super close to a raspberry one.
Right, but
like I would eat a raspberry that color. You know,
I will say this right now. Watch this guy. I'm going to be watching this guy with all the intention in the world, because right now, at least, he's saying the right shit. He is speaking the right shit. He's actually in the position to actually force something, and has the means to do it. So, sure, mainstream media has not reported on him at all, but we will. So, you know, shout out to Oz for the super sticker. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, appreciate you.
But anyway, let's keep going.
I have a thing for that.
Whatever you say, Boomer. Okay, Boomer.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Oz.
All right. I think I'm almost done with this, actually. So,
cool.
Nigerians, whether they support the coup or not, are fed up with being treated as a colonial outpost. Bazoum, who came to power in a controversial and disputed 2021 election, saw his approval ratings plummet after it was announced that Niger would host thousands of French troops who had previously been ejected from Mali and Burkina Faso. The presence of those soldiers precipitated coups in both those countries and immediately sparked angry demonstrations in Niger. Bazoum, who the BBC described as a key Western ally, quote, other words, our bitch.
Yeah.
Failed to read the room and welcome the troops. Today, Niger hosts almost 1,500 French soldiers, as well as many more from the militaries of Germany, Italy, and the United States. The new military government has instructed France to remove its troops.
Okay.
Niger is the cornerstone of the French military operation in Africa, hosting around 1,100 personnel across 6 bases. In 2019, the U.S. opened Air Base 201, a huge $110 million airfield it uses to carry out drone operations across the Sahel region. The stated reason for the
$10 million airfield? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big airfield for that. Like, could you?
Well,
it's Africa. Have you seen airfields in Africa? They're a road without trees. Like,
right, but it's resource rich, so
yes,
it's worth spending the money if you can exploit the resources that they have. So money well spent, or money is, I think they think of it, that's a worthwhile investment in order to do some shit, which will probably come into use now if they do decide to go to war. So
yeah.
Dr. Nick says it's France. I mean, have you seen France?
Yes, I have. Yeah. It's not as pretty as they wish you to think it is.
Right.
So
the stated reason for the foreign troops is to help the region deal with Islamic terrorism. Right. But the threat of Islamic terrorism only arose from NATO's 2011 destruction of Libya, another country which Niger shares a border. The military alliance's attack turned Libya from a nation with one of the highest standards of living in Africa into a failed state run by jihadists, replete with open-air slave markets. The coup, therefore, enjoys widespread support inside the country. A poll published by The Economist earlier this week found that 73% of Nigerians want the military junta to remain in power, with only 27% wishing for Bazoum's return. So no one's looking for his ass to come back in.
No.
Tens of thousands packed into the Seni Konjuke Stadium in Niamey to express their wish for independence and denounce threats of U.S. or French intervention. If ECOWAS forces decide to attack our country before reaching the presidential palace, they will have to walk over our bodies, spill our blood. We will do it, lay down our lives with pride, because we don't have any other country. We only have Niger. Since July 26, our country has decided to take charge of its independence and sovereignty, said demonstrator Ibrahim Bana. The great worry for many is that the strife in Niger will spark a wider war between West African nations that will no doubt ask for help from Europe and the United States. If this happens, the military governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger will doubtlessly call for Russian aid, turning the situation into something resembling the Syrian civil war, but on a grander scale. In the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, France shut off energy imports from Russia, making Nigerian uranium for its aging nuclear power plants more crucial. Yet any attempt at regime change in Niger to restart the uranium supply will anger Algeria, which recently signed a natural gas importation agreement. Thus, the French position is fraught with contradictions and complications.
Yep.
As Western power diminishes, a multipolar world is beginning to be born. As part of that birth, the people of Western Africa are dreaming of a different future. Time will tell if the military coups will prove to be a liberatory force or actions that do nothing to help the oppressed people of the region. One thing is clear, however. The United States and France are unhappy with the changes going on and will fight to maintain their control over Africa. To this end, ECOWAS has proved an important tool at their disposal. And again, we'll talk more about that next week. Yet with so many conflicting interests and so many forces unwilling to compromise, the situation in Niger threatens to boil over into an international war that will bring global attention to one of the world's most overlooked regions. And you know what? If for that reason, if Africa is getting more attention in the news, and I know, like, obviously Mali is getting a lot of attention in the news right now, but if we end up going to war with Africa, if this is the reason, hopefully that the reason why we're going to war in this, from their standpoint, Africa's standpoint, is being uplifted, then I'm all for it, because hopefully that will kind of give us in this country more incentive to kind of do the same thing. Doubt it's going to happen, but at least it kind of shows that it would give an image of Africa that shows it counted to being like poor, defenseless, in need of aid, but actually willing to take a stand against the imperialists that be to ensure their freedom in these countries that the West has wrongfully taken away from them. So
Yeah.
I'm excited, not in the sense of what's going on, but excited for the potential, as, this Ukraine, like Africa is getting into the mix of this, not in the best way, but I think in terms of what they're standing for, I think it's very promising, and I'm excited. Weird to say. But like I said, we're going to keep following this. We'll share a little bit more next week. But yeah, stay tuned, because at least on our end, we're going to report a lot more about Africa than what mainstream media is doing. So
nice. Cool. I wanted to shout out Crab's gonna interview, let me go back up to it. Tuesday he is interviewing John Potash about Tupac. So check that one out. I don't know when that's gonna air, or if that's airing Tuesday. So let us know, Crab, when that's happening. But otherwise, you ready to get started on our next one?
all right, so tell us more about us. Actually, I'm going into the story blind, as not always, but at least in this case. So I'm very curious to see what plea deal this is.
Yeah. Not good. Not good.